So good morning, everybody. Yeah. This module is an economic survey module of 21-22. Although the module is economic survey, the idea is to quickly run through entire Indian economy. Okay. So the idea is that even if some of you, because for most of you are PCM students, you started with Indian economy or economy. So I don't know at that time how well oriented you were to understand some of the concepts. Some of them are technical, some of them are complex. So the idea is to brush up all of Indian economy again using economic survey as a template. So what we have is, we have economic survey as a template because economic survey touches on each aspect of the economy. It sees the overall economy and then it touches sector-wise. Let's say it touches agriculture, industry and services. It touches fiscal policy, monetary policy and external trade. So basically if you're touching all the topics, but the idea is every time we touch a topic, we touch the basic static concepts in that topic. So while we see what is happening currently in that particular area, what's happening in the Indian economy dynamically, we also quickly go and touch the core static concepts. Now, how do we arrive at which is the core static concept? We do an analysis of all the last 10 years economics prelims questions. And we notice that there is a pattern in which the prelims focuses on particular concepts in an area. So agriculture ante vaadu anni adagadu. There are specific topics that he focuses on, or inflation. There are very specific topics that he focuses on, and we will do that analysis first and then see what those topics are. And each chapter when we are doing, we will look at those static topics as well. This is so that A, it is a brush up, and 2, that these 20 hours of module should equip you enough to be able to answer confidently any economic question in the prelims. Yeah. So in order to answer a typical economy question, very often we misunderstand the way economy question is supposed to be handled in UPSC. We think if we have enough data, and that is how we study economy also, there are so many charts, there are so many figures, how many $1 billion, how many metric tons of rice that is being produced in a year. All this data can throw you off balance, but never, not once in the last 10 years, there has been a single question on either formula. All those formulas that you study, GNI, GDP, Y is equal to CI, G, X, NX minus plus by, not necessary. I mean, read them, but you need to understand the concept. UPSC never asks directly the formula. Okay, you need to understand what is that concept. Just by the amount of effort that an aspirant typically puts to memorize those formulas, to memorize some of those figures and charts is unnecessary. What is important is when you look at a chart and if you are able to understand what the chart is saying, just leave it. Go on to the next chart, because today also we will be touching a lot of charts, especially in the second part of today's lecture, where we will be looking at the state of Indian economy, which is an overview of every single sector. Okay, so quickly we will be seeing a lot of charts, but don't bother to memorize the charts. Just follow me as I am explaining what is happening on the chart. Whether it is of external trade, whether it is balance of payments, whether it is exports, whether it's inflation. If I'm making you see through a chart, just follow with me and try to understand what the chart is saying. You do not have to remember the data on the chart. Okay, that is rule number 1. 2, you have to understand how an economy works, which is, now we will quickly do in the next slide an analysis of the previous year's questions, and you will notice out of every 10 questions, only 2 are factual. 8 questions are actually conceptual. You need to understand what the concept is. Inflation ante ento teliyali. Inflation entundi annadu anavasaram. Whether it's 5% or 10% is not so necessary. What is inflation? You should have a good idea. Now, in economics, what does it mean to have a good idea? 1, you should know the concept, and 2, you should have a basic experiential kind of an understanding. Okay, now that is where I think I tried to design the module in a way that it will help you develop an economic intuition. So even if the question has data that, say, you've never heard or you've never seen, but your basic intuition should be able to tell you, okay, all you have to do in prelims is what? Eliminate, right? You don't have to exactly know the answer. So can we try and develop economic kind of thinking within you, that kind of an intuition, so that when you see a question, you should be able to say, logically, this doesn't make sense. No? Now, how will you be able to do it? You will be able to do it when you see that economy is not in parts, but it is, all the parts are connected. It's like a machine, and different wheels of a machine are connected. So one gear or one lever you change and everything else moves. Yeah, and that being able to notice those interconnections, each wheel you have to know, and then how they are all interconnected you have to know. So most of the questions, in fact, when I was trying to, I did not find on Google a simple place where they have analyzed the questions topic wise. Economy questions, you will get it straight away, but nobody has analyzed them topic wise. The problem is, when you're trying to analyze it topic wise, many times you cannot tell which topic it is squarely fitting into. It falls into 2 or 3 sub areas in an economy. Okay, it is monetary policy also, it is financial sector also. Okay, say we are talking about bank rate for scheduled commercial banks. It is monetary policy also, but it is also part of banking and finance or financial sector. Say we are talking about investment, foreign direct investment. It is part of external trade, which affects balance of payments. It is also part of banking and finance. And RBI also gets involved because it deals with foreign exchange reserves. So sometimes it gets little, in fact, most questions, it is tricky because topics are not very square. And that is where I want you to focus for Indian economy, and whether it's in this module or later when you go and study, understand that these topics are given for academic purposes. Okay, academic specialists who do PhDs in economics, they do PhD in international trade, or they do PhD in fiscal policy. But we are not PhDs, we are not academics. We need to understand economy as it real, which is why it is not even called economics. What we do is economy as it really works on the ground, and on the ground everything is related. And being able to see that relations is part of developing an intuitive thinking, and combined with a solid understanding of the concept, you should be able to reason out, use your intuitive thinking, and be able to answer pretty much any question. Okay, the goal for me is, through the module, is so that after this 20 hours, if I give you 15 questions, you should be able to answer at least 10 of them. Okay, a 66 or a 70% hit rate is what I'm looking at. Okay, the course, it is roughly, will take about 1 chapter a day, 1 chapter a class, plus there'll be introduction and concluding classes. So we'll totally have about 15 classes in total. Each lecture we will divide into 45 minutes plus a 5-minute break. How do we go about a lecture? We will typically, before the chapter or through the chapter, we will look at trying to attempt previous year questions. Okay, I am also surprised how much patterned the previous year's questions are in terms of the topics that they touch. So broadly, if you take, say, banking and finance, it's clearly those topics only, that time and again, only variations. So for instance, what I figured is one of the favorite topics in banking and finance is the types of banks. You have public sector banks, example, SBI, PNB. You have scheduled commercial banks, which are, example, exactly. And then you have foreign banks, such as HSBC, exactly. And then you have rural banks, regional banks, small finance banks. Now you have payment banks. So these, almost every year there is a question on banking and finance, and one question, there are about 3 to 4 questions on banking and finance, and one of those questions particularly is with types of banks. So if you just know, there are only 6 types of banks. If you just know which bank is what, you'll be able to answer pakka one question. And how much time does it take? 5 minutes to roughly get an idea of what are the types of banks and what's the differences between them and What are they catering? Each bank caters to a particular clientele or a particular cause. Either it can be cause, like say HDFC initially started for housing and development, or you have banks that started initially for insurance. So it's very simple, and you can expect one question and be able to answer that question. So that is why we take this method, so that you are also familiar with what are the core or repetitive topics that are coming in a sub-area. Constantly, I will also ask questions to you, because this is a module. Your Indian economy is over for the PCM students, for the mentoring students, and for the new people who have come for this module. The assumption is that you know your Indian economy and you're coming like a refresher. So the idea is that you will participate. So it will be, I expect that do not take time, and I know that for some of you I'm teaching for the first time. Don't take too much time in answering. If you know an answer, throw it out. Within 15-20 minutes, I will ban some of you from answering, obviously, because I want others to talk. But yeah, the idea is that you will engage and you will talk. At each point, we will discuss bare fundamentals. Now, this is where in the initial 1 or 1.5 hour, some of you might find, some of you, especially if you have done economy, or if economy is your strong area, you may feel that some of them are very simple. But everyday terms like liquidity, like economic contraction, okay, these are the words that we see every day in the newspaper. But do you know exactly what it means? And if that understanding you don't have, you can't study economy like, okay, one day I sit and, like history or geography. Economy and polity have to be done every day as part of your current affairs. You're constantly being exposed. And if you can't read a economic paper like Financial Times or Economic Times or Business Line and understand everything that the paper is saying, I would say that your economy is not very good. Okay. Because language, I'm talking about just simple words that are used in the economic terms that we are talking about. Now, if you understand the economic terms, then when you touch concepts like, say, statutory liquidity ratio, like say CRAR, or you will immediately be able to tell what they mean, because you understand what liquidity means, what statutory means, and what ratio means. Okay, and that is part of that intuitive thinking that I'm asking you to develop, which is if you know what these terms mean, even if a new term that you've never heard is thrown at you in the exam, you should be able to understand what that term means. Obviously, random guy yedo term throw cheyar, and they never throw like solo model or Damodar model. Rarely, in fact, last 10 years there is no question like that. So there are no names. Every question is concept-based question, unless it's a factual question, which is program or some policy or something like that, scheme or something like that. But otherwise, all of them are concept-based questions, and concepts are worded in a way that you can make sense of what they mean if you know what is the fundamental meaning of the term. And last, yes, participation is a must. Only then we will be able to draw the best out of the module. Anyone who thinks you have an answer, I especially see someone who knows certainly what the answer is, like no doubt you don't really have to talk. Any of you who thinks you know the answer, please express. If you don't know at all, then okay, leave it. But majority of you, I'm assuming, will be in that middle category, and I want you to tell the answer. Now, let's do a quick analysis of previous year's questions. Now, this number is the total number of economy questions in that year. But let me also tell you, I took only pure economy questions. I did not take economy related questions, or any question that is current affairs also I left. So for instance, let's say in 1918, there were questions on some government scheme related to education, some government scheme related to health. Now, are these not part of growth and development? So I took a call there, and what I put in growth and development is strictly, GDP and what is inflation, how does it affect development, or prices, how does it affect development or growth, Only those kind of questions I put there. I removed questions of health, education and other sectors. Okay. Then what you have is this number, which comes to an average of about 15 questions per year. And interestingly, sectoral questions are very, very few. And one of the reasons which a lot of aspirants or students often give me why they are scared to read the economic survey as it is because of the data. And lot of data is actually in these 3 chapters. Okay, and you see how few questions are there with respect to industry and services, to hardly anything. Even agriculture, those questions mostly pertain to not data. Not even one of them is data, first of all. Okay, all of them are either schemes or food prices. Okay, food prices, because food prices directly goes into calculation of CPI, Consumer Price Index, which is an indicator of inflation, and that inflation affects economy. And those connections are what we need to focus on. And usually the question also asks those connections only. If food prices increase, what will happen? You know, this, and it has several consequences. So being able to do that. So as the analysis suggests, our focus is going to be these 3 areas which have the maximum questions. You can notice that banking and finance have the maximum questions of 29. Now, banking and finance, the reason why it has so many questions is because banking and finance includes both savings of individuals, okay, and commercial. And like I said, banking alone, almost there is a question every year. Banking alone. And like I said, banking alone has mostly there is a question on types of banks, or almost every alternate year there is a question on the management or administration of a bank. So your PSU bank, public sector unit banks, who is heading them? Who is the CMD? You know, usually it's an IAS officer. So what is the arrangement there? What is the board of directors? Okay, or if it's a private bank, who is in the management? Who are in the top leadership? How are they administered? What are the types of bank? Another question that is regularly coming in banking is technology related. So the year BHIM or UPI came, there is a question on UPI. The year core banking services, do you know, once all of this was integrated, that year there was a question on CBS, core banking services. So every time there is a technological advancement in banking that affects every consumer, every person, that is definitely asked. So only thing, be careful, not every technology. The technology that I believe that, for instance, may not be this year, I don't know, but next year probably digital rupee will be a likely question. Okay, or maybe this year, I don't know, I mean, it's been given in the budget, but something like that. Do you get it? Like, you know, something related to the technology of banking. And then there are questions on capital and investment, because capital formation. Okay, so all the savings finally move into, they have to get invested somewhere, and that becomes capital. So anyway, we'll see what that is. And then schemes for inclusion. Yes, that is another favorite topic of banking. One of the biggest problem we have in our country is the unorganized sector. Okay, more than 95%, about 95% of our economy is unorganized. And a large part of that unorganized is that they are not integrated. I mean, they are unorganized for 2 reasons. One, they are not registered with the government. But 2, even if you are not registered with the government, but if you have a bank account is usually the first step towards formalizing the economy. Okay, because the moment you have a bank account and you're doing banking transactions, your financial and economic transactions are recorded, and I have a record of them. Okay, so that's the first step towards formalizing an economy. And Government of India is really focused in that area. And it has, again, almost every year there is a question on, say the year they brought, who are those people called? Banking, No, not ombudsman question, though, that also came. No, but ombudsman is not for inclusion. Banking correspondent. Mitras, correspondents, yeah. People who will bring the bank to you rather than, you going to be able to go to a bank. That year, that question was asked. Or there are questions on banks are told by RBI towards priority lending. Now, whom should it give? So that is also usually a favorite question. So from banking point of view, it is types, management, tech used, capital and investments we will see is also part of another thing, and schemes for inclusion, financial inclusion. How do we include people? And I don't know whether you know this or not, the world, including World Bank, including IMF, including the UN, has been celebrating and applauding India for its efforts towards financial inclusion. We have been able to bring the maximum number of people in the human history into the official finance fold, into banking ever. So the numbers are in the tune of millions of people per year. And we've been able to do that. And partly also the whole 2016 demonetization was definitely a push towards that. That was also another reason people were forced to come into banking. And then definitely there were many other things that happened, and whether it's digital payments or anything. So these are the things that you need to look out for when you're looking at banking. And look at the trend. Every year there is on an average about 4 questions every single year. Okay, that's a very good number of questions from a subtopic. We are not even talking, from a very, very small topic of economy. Out of the economy, out of 10 topics, this is just one, and that is something that you need to focus on, because economy anagane aa GDP formulas alaga chadukundu pote, it doesn't help. It would really help if you saw where UPSC is focusing. Then the second one is monetary. One definite question that you're going to have is monetary policy, and it is one of the easiest areas. How does RBI ensure? What does RBI ensure? What is the goal of RBI? No, maintain inflation, but instead of saying maintain inflation, you say price stability. Okay, and if you are able to stabilize the price, for that you need to ensure that inflation is under control. So the goal is price stability, not why do you want to maintain inflation? Why do you want to maintain inflation? Because you want to keep the prices stable. And why do you want to keep the prices stable? What happens if the prices increase?
To make the demand and supply.
Value of, yeah, that is inflation. Value of money decreasing is another way of looking at inflation. But what's the problem with that? Okay, earlier this laptop I used to get for 10,000. Now it is costing me 20,000. My wages also usually increase if it is inflation. I will buy 20,000 rich konukunda. What's the problem?
To ensure the demand and supply are stable.
If price increases, will demand and supply will they not meet? Will the demand for laptops reduce because price increased?
Yes, sir.
But wages could increase out there inflation lo avava. Actually, it will get affected in a good way. If there is inflation and if there is currency devaluation, if there is inflation, money ka value decreases, which is currency devaluation. If currency devalues, your exports will increase. It is good for you. Circulation of money. People will save more, you are saying. Okay, but that they can do when they are earning 10,000 also.
Is not the proportion is not increasing equally as the price is increasing. The proportion of the wage will increase in a certain percentage, but the price of the laptop is doubled.
Yeah. You are close. You are very close. Prices have a very unique feature. They are sticky. Okay. So, let's say because of inflation, it went up. Do you think after the inflation is adjusted, it will come down? It will remain there. And that is one of the problems. And there are other problems. The problem that you were mentioning is that there can be a demand-supply mismatch. Now, what is a price? Price is the cost of something, but it is not the cost of manufacturing something. Okay. Plus profit. Now profit can be anything. I can have 10% profit. There are products which have 100% profit.
Considering all four factors of production will be determining the price.
That is cost. That's not price. All factors of production put together, land kavali, capital kavali, labor kavali, you bought capital, interest pay chestao, iyanni kalipte, it's the cost. A cost of a Coca-Cola bottle will be about what, 2 rupees? Yeah, the demand forces come into picture. So you have 100 bottles and then there is enough demand, then it will come up. Price is a signal. It is a signal in the economy. Price captures an information regarding how much demand is there for the product other than the cost. In fact, it has less to do with the cost. There are many times where we sell things where big corporates, I'm talking about giants like even Apple, sometimes sell certain products less than cost in losses. And they do it for a reason. Okay, so cost is, price and cost, our connection is very weak. They are very weakly correlated. The strongest correlation is price is usually a signal of how much demand and supply there is in a market. Okay, it signals. It is like a transmitter. It is constantly signaling. And that signaling needs to be stable. The problem with inflation is there is too much money or too much, and that signal doesn't change so quickly because signal is also a psychological phenomenon. I perceive it to have a certain amount of value. Okay. Anyway, we will touch this in detail when we are doing the price part of it, which is what I said. When I said we will touch the fundamentals, this is what I meant. We will touch basic words like what does a price mean? What does cost mean? What does currency mean? Liquidity mean? Sort of things. Then you have fiscal policy. Obviously, fiscal policy is to do with government revenue and expenditure. Okay. Every year there is a question on that. Okay, before fiscal, let me just touch monetary. Monetary, one of the questions that is regularly coming is types of money. Okay, your M0, M1, M2, M3, M4 for those of you who know, narrow to broad money. Okay, again, that's another terminology. We will see what those monies are. There are different kinds of money in circulation, and there is one question regularly, almost on an average every year on types of money. So just knowing that M0, M1, M2, M3, M4, you are likely to be able to answer one question. There are financial instruments, and then what are the financial instruments that are there in the hands of RBI to regulate the circulation of this money? What does RBI do? It regulates the circulation of this money in order to keep prices stable and inflation under check. Also, by the way, you need to know that a certain amount of inflation is good for growth. Okay, or growth will invoke certain amount of inflation. So how much is a very subjective thing. So I think this year they are using the word targeted, not yeah, but they've used a specific word. We'll come there. So targeted band. They're saying, our inflation is within the targeted band that we wanted, kind of a thing. Now, so one question that you can probably expect from monetary policy is what are the tools, what are the instruments available with RBI? There are 7 or 8 instruments, that's it. From open market operations. Open market operations are RBI is able to buy and sell government security bonds on the open market. Okay, it does that to pull money out of the system or to pump money into the system. Using OMOs, it does one of these two. And then you know the other instruments, SLR, CRR, blah, blah, blah. If you don't know, don't worry, we will touch each one of them when that chapter comes, we will touch each one of them. But each of these is an instrument that is there with the RBI. It is contracting and pumping out money into the system to keep the inflation under check so that the prices are stable. So those instruments method, there is roughly one question. And then the most important one is interconnections. Okay, with monetary policy, whenever you're doing something like this, when you're pumping money, then banks have more money. If banks have more money, what will happen to lending rates? Or if you're using, and you're reducing, say, lending rate. Okay, there are questions on marginal standing lending facility rate. Yeah. Or one of these, definitely one of these 6 or 7 instruments that are there, on one of the 7 instruments and its effects. Either there is a question on the instrument itself, or there is a question on what are its effects. So, when RBI does this, what will happen finally to the consumer, to the person who is saving, to the person who is borrowing? What is its effect? So, you need to know how one change in the liver transmits into the last person who is receiving or investing in the financial, in banks. Then there are questions on foreign trade. This has to do with exports, imports, foreign direct investment. I mean, foreign trade, I put, technically foreign trade is export and import. It does not include foreign direct investments. Okay, but I mean, ideally I should have put external sector. That would have been the right term for it. But I included those also, which is why investments are there. So foreigners also invest in our country. In fact, right now, every month, our exports are lesser than our imports. Okay, we export, say, $100 of products. We import $110 of products, which means we have a deficit of, trade deficit of $10. And every month, if I'm $10 short, and to pay this, we use RBI. RBI has foreign exchange reserves, and it uses to pay this off. How are you going to generate those dollars? Where are those dollars coming every month? Extra $10. See, from what I'm exporting, I get 100, and those 100 I will give. But this additional 10, where will I get from? One of the ways, in fact, right now, for the last several months, years, we are getting through investments. Foreigners are investing in our country, whether through FDI, foreign direct investment, what does it mean? We will look into it, or through FIIs, foreign institutional investments. Through either of the routes, foreigners are investing. They are not buying or selling anything. It's not trade. It's not export or import. It is an investment that they are doing. And that investment is, say, every month $20. So in that $20, we are paying off $10 here, and we are keeping $10 extra. So right now, India is in a balance of payment surplus. We are not in deficit. Every month, we are in a surplus. Although this might change very soon because of the Ukrainian crisis that has come up. So there is a very high chance that oil and gas prices go up. What will happen if oil and gas prices go up? This is our export. This is our import bill. Now this import bill will go up. If it becomes 20, already we are hitting a saturation. If it becomes 30, even this is not going to save us. This is FDI. This is foreign direct investments and FIIs. Even this will not be able to save us. But right now we have some buffer. We have buffer for how many months? According to economic survey, does anybody know? At this rate, if we continue, how many? 13 months right now. We have about 13 months buffer, and that is called, it's called import cover. There was a question in Prelims on what is import cover, straight away. Okay, it is that buffer that you have. How many months can you hold? UPSC will never ask how many months like that, because that's a changing phenomenon. Okay, it will not even ask according to economic survey how many months. It will never ask like that. But you need to know what is economic cover, import cover. Import cover is the period of foreign exchange reserves that you have that will cover you. Okay, it will cover us right now for 13 months. Okay, then indices and measurements, there is usually one question. Let's just see. Indices and measurements, yeah. Not every year, but yeah, about there. So because last year there wasn't, maybe this year we can expect indices and measurements. Now indices and measurements, what are indices and measurements? There are two types. One are the national measurements, and then there are international. Now what I noticed is there are more international measurements than national measurements that are being asked in UPSC. So for instance, in fact, they are not even, and they will never ask according to IMF what is your GDP forecast, or according to World Bank what is this. No, they are asking two kinds in these reports. These are all your reports, your global competitiveness, ease of doing business. They are not asking rank, this, that. Usually they are asking who publishes that report. Okay, when you are seeing a report, find out who publishes that report. If it's ease of doing business, who is the one who is it World Bank? Is it IMF? Is it Asian? And usually E4 options are usually it is World Bank, IMF, ADB, and Economic Forum, World Economic Forum. And he will generally not ask what ADB and World Economic Forum are publishing. It is usually the reports that are being published either by World Bank or by IMF. Okay? There may be one option that says something about data, but you can easily eliminate it. Believe me, it is not at all a big deal. So one you have to focus in indices and measurements is who is publishing. And don't go into some remote report, ekkado yedo teeskodu, please. Only the big reports they are asking. Okay? And two, who is publishing it? And actually, yeah, it is pretty much that. And you know what does that report deal with? Obviously, you need to know that. Ease of doing business. What does that report deal with? Does it tell how good it is for a capitalist to invest in that country, or does it tell how much time it takes for a business to start from the time it is if somebody wants to start a business, how many days does it take? All the, you have to apply to so many government agencies and get permissions and all that. How many days? So what does that index or what does that measurement indicate? So same in indices and measurements, usually if it is international, it is who is giving it. And if it is national measurements such as CPI, such as WPI, IIP, okay, this economic survey, they have touched PMI, Purchasing Managers Index. Okay, we will see what that is, because I'm guessing they might touch that this year. So A, who publishes these reports, and two, what does that report deal with? Like, what is it indicating? What is it measuring? What is it calculating? So just those two. Don't go into the data. Ye desham, ye rank, yakkadundi, what all, not necessary. What does the report deal with? Who publishes it? Simple. And in national, there are about 7-8 major reports. International, there are about 5 major reports. That's it. That's it. Do not keep a list of 15 or 20 in your thing and try to memorize them. If you understand these, you will get the logic, and that's only important. Then you have fiscal policy. Okay, there is usually one question from fiscal policy at least, if you notice, except 2020. There is one question at least, and usually one of the question, or the question that it deals with, has to do with head. Revenue lo edi veltadi, expenditure lo em veltadi. Revenue lo, capital lo em vastadi. What's the other one? Capital revenue, capital expenditure, and what's the other expenditure? So it depends on, which head something will fall under. And this also, again, not too complex into which head, it is just pipeline, surface level. Once in a while, there is a question on, say, GST year. Obviously, there is a question on GST. I think 2017. 18, there was a question on GST, fiscal policy. Yeah, out of these two questions, one of them was. So when such big measures are made, obviously, that you can expect one question. Or there will usually be a question on the Fiscal Deficit Act, the FRBM. Okay, and again, not how much is the thing and is it 2%, 3%, roughly what does that act mean and who is responsible and which office is responsible and how do you keep it low. So this year, the government is doing pretty well fiscally, and it is interesting because given how much they had to spend in COVID for the health crisis and sector, how is it that the government is doing so well fiscal deficit? We'll discuss that. So one, you need to know the heads roughly. Usually the question is about that only. Idi ye head lo keltadi, and let us logically break down why those heads are put in that way when we are dealing with that chapter. And finally, there are some questions on growth and development, and usually those questions focus on infrastructure building in the country. Okay, almost all the questions pertaining to growth and development in UPSC previous year's questions have to do with either infrastructure fund, or who is funding that infrastructure, or some big infrastructure project, or something of that kind, but it has something to do with the infrastructure. Okay, or some kind of types of investment for infrastructure or something of that kind. So that is our analysis. Like I said, the questions are definitely, I gave you out of every 10 questions, 8 are undoubtedly analytical or conceptual. There are only 2 that are factual. Okay, and nothing related to data, not even one. Okay, data, ranking, metric tons, measures, no. You need to know who is giving the report and what does that report deal with, not interconnections rather than silos. This is very, very important. I cannot overemphasize this point. The economy has to be understood as which small part is moving which, and then moving which, and therefore moving which. You should be able to, and only that way you can very easily guess questions for your economy. By memorizing it, you will not be able to do it. But by knowing which wheel is moving which other wheel. Now, if you know those interconnections, you will definitely be able to do it. Now, don't get intimidated by this picture. We will break down every single component of that, and hopefully by the end of that, you should be able to tell. Seriously, don't get intimidated by this picture at least. It is very easy to break it down. Yeah. So, out of those 10 questions, nearly 6 questions check whether you are able to tell the interconnections. Okay. There is an inflation of, say, 10% that's happening in the economy. Whom does it benefit? A guy who has borrowed money, or a guy who has lent money? Who has borrowed money, obviously. No, for those of you who feel it is not so obvious, we will figure out. That's what I'm trying to say. You need to be able to tell the steps. Why is it so obvious? Okay, like from inflation to why the borrower of money is at an advantage when there is inflation. The questions are way more practical. No theory questions, none whatsoever, not even one. Okay, no this model, this thinker, that thinker. It is not economics. It is Indian economy. It is practical. You are applying for a test of being a public administrator, and it only tests that much. Do you understand the real economy? A real person who is earning wages and putting it, saving it, whether in his bank account or in his postal or in his provident fund. What is happening to that money? Where is it going? Through the stock exchange, into investments, into corporations. And those corporations, what are they doing with that money? Are they putting it outside, or are they putting it in the country? What is the risk involved at each level? Who is managing that risk? These are those interconnections, and this is practically what we are interested in. We are not interested in who gave which theory or data and statistics. Generally, what I will do is, most of the time I'm picking text as it is from the economic survey. I really encourage you to study the economic survey yourself. Simple language. Now, this is one of the first things. I have read most economic surveys in the last 10 years. At least glance through quickly if I don't have the time. And I can tell you, usually economic surveys are written much more academically, because for a very long time we had an economist who was our prime minister, and even though he left, we had big economists as our chief economic advisors, and that effect was always there. So you saw strong economics language in the, but this time that's not the case. This time it is very, very approachable language. You can really just read the text and understand. If you know these fundamentals, some of what they mean, you should be able to, and I would really encourage you to do that, to read the economic survey. I have myself not edited much. Wherever I wanted to make a point, I have just copy pasted the text. That way, one, you would have heard from me what the text means and seen for yourself that the text is something that you can easily comprehend. Nobody has told me 45 minutes. Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break.